Welcome to the Becoming babyREADY podcast, your podcast for queer family planning. My name is Sam, and throughout this podcast, you'll hear me have conversations with professionals who work alongside people who want to start and grow their families, as well as parents of intentionally created families. Everyone I speak to identifies as being part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. This is your opportunity to learn answers to questions you didn't even know you had. Let me introduce you to Kristen and Alexis, proud parents to two beautiful twin babies. There were some ups and downs throughout their journey, but they have come through and their babies are thriving. Welcome to the two of you. Please tell us about the members of your family.
Absolutely. My name is Alexis, she, her.
I'm Kristen, she, her, mommy,
Mama.
And off camera, we have Jade and Nova, who are our identical twin girls. And also off camera is my mom. So that's our baby wrangler. We have a whole village of a lot of support, both our biological family and chosen family, that made it possible for us to do something like this right now.
Excellent. Well, I'm appreciative. Thank you. Thank you. And we should say, these are fresh new members of your family.
Yes. They were born earlier in June, and we just recently brought them home. And we're really excited.
Yeah, it's been a 2-week beautiful blur.
Yeah.
I have no doubt. Of the various methods available to 2S LGBTQI identifying individuals for creating a family for themselves, would you please be telling us about how you went about growing your family?
Yeah. So
when we first started, we were out on our journey. It was the pandemic, and we had a known donor who's a good friend of ours. We were just talking about this. We were in a pod. We lived down the street from each other and thought we would just do this at home with what's called a Mosey baby, which is an at-home pregnancy kit that is medically designed for ICI, cervical what's that, ICI?
Yeah, ICI. ICI is basically like the traditional turkey baster method.
Insemination.
Yeah.
And then there's intrauterine insemination, which is at a clinic. So we were going to do that. We thought this would be the cheap, old school way. And then our donor moved for a job. And so we had to figure out a way of getting pregnant that didn't involve hopping on planes to across the country in the middle of a pandemic. Right. So we went to a fertility clinic, and we both did IVF egg retrievals and made embryos with both of our eggs with our donor's sperm. And then we took some time off to enjoy ourselves in the summer and time together, and then began attempting to get pregnant with transfers, and myself getting pregnant last fall.
Wow. So you found something to do through the pandemic, right?
Yeah, it kept us busy.
No doubt. Given that achieving parenthood for members of our community is very infrequently free, as even if you had to fly to meet your donor, had you kept it the same technique as you'd originally planned, it still wouldn't have been free. But involving clinics and egg retrievals and things like that all cost money. Are you comfortable sharing with us the costs that you incurred to be able to become parents to these two babies?
Yeah, we can definitely give an estimate. So out of pocket, we ended up paying close to 12 or 15,000, which is very low, actually.
Yeah.
The state of this in this country specifically. Illinois apparently has some of the best fertility benefits if you have access to that through insurance or state insurance or employer insurance. So we were definitely very fortunate because the work that I do and the places that I work at are really, really helpful as far as trying to help out with fertility benefits. Through this, I also learned a lot. We also learned a lot about different companies that are providing loans to people for different parenting options, whether it be you wanted to adopt or you want to go through the IVF process. And also with that too is coming a little bit more education, but I think that the education piece is still pretty far and few in between. Yeah. If you don't know where to look for the information, you probably won't find what you were looking for. Right. But yeah, so out of pocket, probably I'd say around $12,000 to $15,000, which again is not a lot for how much fertility treatments actually cost. And that's like with IVF and also with IUI, which is like a in between the ICI and IVF. Basically, you just do an insemination, right, but there's no medical treatment around it.
There isn't as, yeah, it's not as medically invasive.
Yeah.
We skipped right past that because we knew we both wanted to carry, and we also weren't sure if we were going to do something called reciprocal IVF, which is when and essentially the same as surrogacy, where you can carry each other's eggs. We did not do that, but that's something we wanted to have the option to do. So we both did retrievals. And with expenses, there's if you're doing IVF or you're doing IUI, there's the expenses medically, right? But then, when you think about queer parenting and you zoom out, you've also got the expenses of what many parents choose to do, especially in our really politically tumultuous times, which is same-sex parent adoption, which is something we'll have to do. Alexis is on the birth certificate. I was the gestational carrier. She was on the birth certificate. Northwestern Medical Hospital in Chicago has parent one, parent two, yeah, which is amazing and wonderful. But a lot of us feel that is not enough security, especially crossing state lines. And so there's the expenses of that legal endeavor. Also, any expenses that might go into procuring, your sperm, whether that is because you're going to do insemination
or a sperm bank, or even the contract. So that also requires lower fees to do a contract for a known donor. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it really depends on what you're thinking in terms of expenses, and there's always going to be things that come up that you probably didn't think of.
And I think that's been a universal sentiment as I've been speaking to people through this process. I think the universal sentiment is, if you have a number in mind and you've looked at your costs and you're being realistic about the number you have in mind, add 50% because something's likely going to come up that you weren't anticipating. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. And we entered that knowing that there are going to be costs that we have to deal with, but also we were capable of fielding those costs as we needed to, whether it be a payment plan or something else, or other support. And we know a lot of people who've just done it rogue. So they've found someone and then they've kind of gone about this process on their own, and they were really, fortunate and it worked. So it's not an absolute must that the path we take, that it's, costs a lot of money. Right. That's the only way to get pregnant, but that's the path we chose. So we knew that we had the opportunity to do that. And it's something that actually worked pretty well for us.
Yeah. And I think, these clinics, and sometimes really they push IVF, they make a lot of money from it. Sure. And, they really pushed us at our clinic, Vios in the United States, on going through the IVF process. We skipped past IUI because of me being over 35, PCOS for both of us. It, really had us convinced that we didn't have other options, or it would take a long time and we'd end up back there. It's difficult. It's hard to know. It's very personal, but I just want to encourage people to explore options and allow yourself the time to think about what's going to be best for you. Don't be afraid to switch clinics even. We know people who have done that because that made them more comfortable. It's going to be different for everyone, but I think in the beginning, especially me, less so her, I was like, we got to get this done.
The clock.
But we've been told about the clock our whole lives, right?
Exactly.
So it's not, when you're working, when everyone around you talks about working against time, then you can't help but feel a sense of urgency associated with it, right? And then you go in and they start tossing around words like geriatric, and you're thinking, hold on. Hold on for a minute. And
I didn't have as much of that. I think that they're smart and they are better around language. I don't know if I even ever heard geriatric, but they say because it gets more difficult after a certain age, or the less strong egg quality, all those things. And some of that is rooted in science and fact. It's real, but also so is stress making it difficult to get pregnant. So that's why I think we both feel really happy, especially now that we're in twin land, that we took last summer off. We had a difficult time through our retrievals. We both physically had a difficult time.
Yeah.
And we were like, you know what? What's 3 months of our lives when we're going to be parents the rest of our lives?
Yeah, let's take a break. Let's do something for ourselves. And so,
we traveled, which is our favorite thing to do together. We spent time together. We went to visit family, and we had a great summer last summer. And then I got pregnant successfully after 3 times. Was very lucky in that regard. And so, you know, I think that is some advice I would give is don't feel rushed, feel ready in your partnership. If it is a partnership that you're pursuing parenting with, you know, it's so important to be very connected, to have taken the time to feel prepared, to feel assured in your relationship, because that's going to be so essential through that getting pregnant process, through parenting. And the same for if you're doing it individually. Do you have the support system? Do you feel good within yourself to pursue that path? You're not going to be prepared for everything, but having a solid base, if it is with partnership or with community, I think is, especially as queer people, is absolutely essential.
Sure. That's absolutely true. And I would think for the two of you especially, it's been vitally important over the last few months when your children weren't at home with you. So you're having to balance traveling to see them and spending time with them and finding those moments of connection whenever you can with your partner too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, that's another thing that comes up that you don't think of. Like, I'll be honest, I didn't know what was standard or what was typical for twins to spend time in the NICU after birth. And so we have been thinking, oh, if they're even born early, which is pretty typical, we just need to be prepared for them to come home early. We didn't know, oh, it's, you know, if they're coming home before 37 weeks, it's almost certain that they're going to spend some time in the NICU. And in our case, it ended up being 3 months. It was 12 weeks because I gave birth unexpectedly. It was medically necessary at 28 weeks. And I don't say that to scare people. You know, you just never know what your path is going to be.
No.
And we felt very confident in the hospital. We were at Northwestern and the care there was incredible, but it is not something that we expected to spend their first 3 months traveling to the hospital every day. But then it's over and they're home now and it's like, it's behind you. And
right.
And that part is over. Yeah, exactly.
When you're in it, it feels like everything, but when it's behind you, you think, wow, we weathered that. Look at how strong we are, right?
Absolutely.
Are there any words of caution that you would share with members of our community as they embark upon their journey to becoming parents?
Yeah, I mean, right from the start, I think that that we had entered into this process very optimistically as queer parents, but the system itself is not necessarily queer friendly still, and that's something I think cognitively we know in our community or have experienced, so we know from that knowledge as well. So my advice would be, as Kristen was saying, like, have your support systems, because it's a system that you might be fighting against, but know like who's in there that would be willing to help. So like all of the nurses were very, very privy to our experience and wanted to know how they can make it better. And then we constantly talked about that. That was really cool. And then also to just like knowing, like you said, if you have to switch clinics, if you don't feel like safe as a or validated as a queer person in your identity, go. They don't need you, and you don't need them. At the same time, like if they're treating you like you're in the machine, then like that's not how you want to start out your pregnancy process or your process to parenthood. And so yeah, I think that would be words of caution, is that it still will be shocking when something comes up. It's not going to be an easy road, but also with that, know that again, you have that basis of community and people who are in this clinic trying to help you. So remember who that is, because those will be your people who are going to really help you through this process as well.
And advocate for you. And I think that also goes for your community. When I think who we learned the most from and we felt really empowered by information tools was people within our community. And I know not everyone has necessarily a bunch of friends who have already gone through trying to get pregnant, but you know, if you can't find that within your own friend group or community, there's online resources, there's Facebook groups. There are resources out there if that's not within your immediate, geographical community or within your own circle, because the support that we got from friends who had been through this, we can't even articulate what that has meant for us. And then just, which is very much, I think, a part of a queer mindset, value is sharing. So much of what we've gotten has been hand-me-down, which is whether that's advice or whether that's resources or whether that's, now like baby carriers and car seats. It's really beautiful to have that shared within community. So I think, knowing you're going to go into that, and there's going to be things that come up, that you have other places to be able to, if not get the advice or resources, just to be able to share so that you can be like fortified again. Because it's going to be inevitable. There's going to be a certain level of educating that you have to do, right? I mean, we've had to do that in different instances, and it can feel really good when you've had to challenge something that exists or challenge a medical professional and you win, and those parenting wins are really huge.
Sure.
When I unexpectedly delivered at 28 weeks, we're still in a pandemic, obviously, have a strict rule of only two parents, two parents that can come to the NICU. And our donor was in town. We're very close with him. He has a role in our children's lives. We are legally the parents, but he's an important part of the family. And they weren't going to allow him based on the rules that they have to be able to see the girls. It was Father's Day. There's just so many reasons. It was a very close call in my delivery. We all made it. And, at first they said no. And the second time they said no. And I was very calm. We were very calm and took it from a few different approaches, talked to different people, and we were able to make it possible for him to spend time with them. And we met them halfway. We didn't all go in together. I stayed back. It was a one-time thing. They said we wouldn't be able to do again in their time in the NICU. And we were like, that's fine. So I would just also encourage people to not give up and to know that these are not always hard and fast rules. On the other hand, like the FDA, in our case, again, with our donor, like you're automatically considered high risk if you're a man that has sex with men. It's really messed up. It's it's in the AIDS epidemic
and homophobia.
Sure. And so we had to legally agree to having a high risk donor, and those things are really difficult. And, we really obviously want to fight the system, but the FDA is a big system. So you're not necessarily going to win in that case. If you don't sign that paperwork, it's not going to happen. So you have to, I don't want to say pick and choose your battles.
I mean, it is, it's
kind of,
it's basically, it's like, there's some things that you're going to have to kind of move through and move past. And there are some things that might not work with what you want to do, and that's okay. But understand that, like you said, it's going to impact your process, and that's fine. So I think that would be actually part of my second piece of advice, is that take your time with it. Like there's no rush to do things. People might be trying to push things on you, but take your time, talk to other people, read as much as you want to, because there's no beginning and end to this process. Some people will be in it for years and years. Some people will be in it for a few months. And through all of that, you're going to learn a lot about yourself and just navigating through it. So definitely take your time with it and choose what it is that you want to put more energy into, because at the end of the day, the goal is your parenthood and what you would like. Right. I guess not to say that's not the end goal, but that is what you're working towards. And so whatever's going to get you there is going to be different for everyone. And it's up to you to really process that.
Yeah.
Hold on for just a moment. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Julia from New Hope Surrogacy and Egg Donation. My partner Jenna and I help people all around the world pursuing an alternative path to parenting through surrogacy, egg donation, embryo donation, and adoption. We support surrogates and egg donors all across Canada, helping parenting dreams come true. For more information, please visit www.newhopesurrogacy.ca and find us on Facebook and Instagram.
That revisits the comment you made earlier about stress, Kristen, too, and that if you're carrying babies, one or more than one, and you are so worried and stressed out, that takes a physical manifestation on you as well. And so you're right, you kind of have to decide what is the hard and fast that I can live with and not live with. And and I set my boundaries in place, and boundaries are important. You know, one of the professionals I speak to for this show talks about the value of putting boundaries in place for our own protection. We don't do it for, you know, to hurt other people, but we do it for ourselves, to protect ourselves and our family, right?
Right. Right. And those can be difficult conversations. It's not fun. It's not fun to have to do that educating that a lot of us have to do, but you're not just doing it for yourself. You're doing it for the folks that come in after you or that are going through it simultaneously. And that, you know, not that you have to feel the weight of the community on your back, but it is really amazing when you do advocate for yourselves. You're not just advocating for yourselves, you're advocating for so many other people that are going to have similar experiences to you.
Yeah. And if you've made their life a little bit easier, then maybe that gives them the incentive to push a little harder for themselves, for the people that come after them, right?
Yeah, precisely.
So we just pay it forward, as it were, right? You've spoken and touched on instances of othering during the process of becoming parents and that kind of thing. Have there, outside of the times that we've spoken about, because I don't want to keep you too long, have there been other times that you felt like the other through all of this process and becoming parents that you were surprised by, perhaps?
Not surprised by, nothing that wouldn't happen every day for us, or I guess wouldn't be possibly happen every day for us. So there are a couple instances when we went in to visit the girls and they like asked if we were both the parents, and we had to be like, yeah, we're both the parents, which is why we're here, you know?
Doubting yourself every time,
like,
right?
We're doing the calculation in their head. And so like, again, our experience with just in our relationship, even before we had kids, like we ran into that so many other times. And then we know that like, we don't have anything to explain, but if you're wondering, yes, we're together. And so like those little everyday, I don't want to say like microaggressions, but things where people just like aren't really privy to what might be happening, or aren't and just aren't really respectful in their own discovery. Like those things just roll off. But there hasn't I don't think there's been any other instance of like an othering.
Yeah, I don't, you know, I've actually been surprised by how well received and respected, and I don't really, you know, for lack of better language of saying normalized, our relationship and dynamic has been through the fertility process, and especially at Northwestern Hospital, to their credit. But I think a lot about what other people would be experiencing, especially like trans and non-binary parents or folks that are parenting solo or getting pregnant, so, you know, on their own, how that would come up over and over and over again. There is such an ingrained culture of mommy this, mommy that, and this connection of, if you're a gestational character, that you are a mom, or that, and that like is connected into whether you would be breastfeeding or chest feeding. That's connected to just so many things around that identity of mother. And I think of mother as like so much more expansively than that. So I think that is really where there needs to be a lot of work done in the industry, is actually really more around like gender. And that's, you know, everyone benefits from that, because more inclusive language just means more people are included. It's not that complicated. I think people make it more complicated than it needs to be. For example, you're saying, you know, mom needs to get her sleep. You don't need to say mom needs to get her sleep. You know what I mean? Like you can say like, you know, you just had a baby, you need to get your sleep, or you know, there's ways you can speak really neutrally, or you can refer to people as parents or a parent or a carrier. Because even sometimes if you're carrying a baby, you're not necessarily the parent. In that case too, you could be a gestational carrier. So, or, you know, a surrogate. And it's unfortunate that it's so politicized. But I think that's where a lot of work really needs to be done. I think in the fertility world in particular, well, you know, that's not necessarily true. We know other people who've had really difficult time being lesbian parents and going through that process. But personally, I was actually surprised by how affirming I've been. When we were in the NICU, they asked us how we like to be referred to, and wrote like, you know, our mom, or, you know, mommy, mama, etc. And they wrote them on the board, and it was like they didn't even blink with the way that they treated us and engaged with us. So I feel really fortunate for that.
Absolutely. Reason. Especially when it's already a challenging and emotionally and physically challenging time, to have those little things come out where they put them on the board and it just is almost like, hey, that's a win. Excellent. We'll take that. And next step. Right.
It really is.
Given that this is the first show of its kind, as far as I know, anywhere in the world, and that you're just so freshly past expecting your baby yourself, do you feel that there's a benefit to a show like this? And I recognize there's bias because you've agreed to be here. So, I mean, that's a given. But do you think that there would be a benefit to the show like this? And if so, what kinds of things would you want to see included in a show like this?
Yeah, I think there's benefit to a show like this. I mean, we listen to lots of podcasts. We read books before we, actually got into our own parenthood journey. And I think that like stories are one of the most powerful things that you could give to someone. And an experience doesn't have to be completely aligned with someone in order for them to get something out of it. And I know that personally too. So yeah, I definitely think there's value in that, because the more we share, the more visibility there is, not only for the people who are not in our community, but more importantly also for people who are in the community and trying to figure out something like this. They might not have other people around them who are doing that. So yeah.
I think that it's definitely essential. And I think the more that we have media outlets and platforms that are focusing on these experiences of, making our families, the more nuanced we can be. So it isn't, one platform, one podcast, one show that has to shoulder that, because there is so much nuance in building and making a family. I think things that would be helpful for people, which again can be challenging, you can't accomplish everything, in your show, but is resource sharing and just overall the encouragement that it doesn't have to be one way, that there are multiple ways, and empowering people. That's, what's going to make you feel confident, and confidence is so important with navigating this. And I think when if it's something like getting pregnant, where, we don't have a really healthy relationship with and broad understanding of how we can get pregnant, go through our pregnancy, have children. There's so many different ways we can do that. It's still very, I think we're very limited in scope on how we present that to the world. So the more that we can educate folks and share our stories, like you can't be what you can't see.
Absolutely.
And so being, just being in the world and existing as a family like ours is making its impact, and is important for the world to see.
I fully agree. As we wrap up, and again, recognizing that this is still fairly fresh with you, but what has been your favorite part? I mean, right now that snuggle looks pretty good. So I'm going to say for Mama, that might be the favorite part of parenting so far, but what have been your favorite parts of parenting so far?
Gosh.
Yeah, I know. I think just like getting to know them and having them just like discover the world around them. I mean, I haven't spent as much time with babies this fresh and this long. And so everything they do, I'm just very tickled by. And I also love the snuggles too. Like our dog doesn't really snuggle that much. So I'm like, okay, cool. And now we have two of them. Yeah, we'll do that. So yeah, there's nothing like a baby's love on you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Those snuggles really melt everything. This can be really difficult, and it's very moment by moment. So being in a moment is really important. I think it's definitely that building that bond, obviously, with your children, especially when we've had distance between them for their first 3 months.
Yeah.
And we were limited to like a certain amount of time, having to put them back. The first few days I had to actually remind myself like, oh, we don't have to give these babies back. Like they're ours forever.
Yeah.
And it's huge, because we didn't have that experience of babies born, taking them home. So it's been really healing to be able to have them in our home and create a routine. I also, something that's been really special to me is, in the case of our family where we have two parents, is seeing like my wife with our children and how that just continues to deepen our bond.
Right.
even more layers to our relationship, and seeing our children love her for the reasons that I love her. So like I always used to talk about like, oh, I can't wait till I could see that those babies nuzzle in your neck. And now I get to see that all the time. And it's very healing and very beautiful. Those little moments really mean everything.
Yeah. And those are the ones we savor and hang on to, especially in these first days and weeks when it's all so fresh and it's sometimes overwhelming. But it goes by so fast. So get every single snuggle in that you can.
It really does. And it's something that has been hard for me and that I have to remember is, and this is both a relief and bittersweet, is that it's temporary. Like this time right now when they're so small and still figuring out a routine and we're all getting to know each other, those difficult times, it's temporary. It won't be like that. And then there will be something new to learn. Right. But it won't take that forever, which is also why, taking in and loving and just really digging into those moments is really important.
It really is. It really is. I want to thank you both so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It has meant the world to me. And then just to see those snuggles at the end just was the icing on the cake. I really appreciate it all.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Exactly. It's so important.
It's wonderful. And I want to see more and more of these resources that people feel empowered by. And I'm really excited to see what you do with the show.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. If you have a story that you'd like to share, or you know someone who might, if you're a professional who works in the capacity of helping people start and grow their families, and you identify as being a part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community yourself, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We always have room for more stories to share, and there's always more learning to do.